Welcome to Aliyah Yomi. Today we're going to be learning Tazria Sheni, the second Aliyah in Parshas Tazria. Our Aliyah is 12 psukim long, running from Perek Yud Gimel Pasuk Vov to Pasuk Yud Zayin. The topic of our Aliyah is the plague of leprosy. Remember that this Aliyah actually really started on the topic in the previous Aliyah, where a person has some sort of defect on their skin. They're presented in front of the Kohen. The priest then locks them up for 7 days. Our Aliyah picks up over here. Now the Kohen takes out this person, looks at them on the 7th day, and if this plague, if this spot on the skin has now keha, it is dimmed, it is not spread, then the Kohen will purify the person, and he can wash his clothes and become pure. However, if it does spread, then after the day that he purified him, then he is brought back to the Kohen, and the Kohen will make him impure. He gets tsaras. We now hear that in any case where tsaras is brought to the Kohen from the person, there's a seis levana ba'or, and let's say there's a white splotch on the person, and it now has white hair in it, and there is also good live skin in this area. Then it's called tsaras noshenes. It is a type of tsaras which is impure, but he does not need to be locked up. He becomes tameh right away. So it's interesting that actually good healthy skin, good healthy areas in it is actually perhaps a sign of impurity in this case as well. And then there's various different descriptions of this type of thing spreading, and let's say if a person is covered from head to toe as well, then they're pure until the point that it starts healing, the same kind of thing as well, then the person will become impure. So a few basics over here just to appreciate what's going on here is that, first of all, is tsaras still around? So technically speaking, the way that it's usually translated is the word leprosy. However, as Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan points out in his footnotes to the Living Torah, that the word leprosy itself comes from the word in Greek, which is lepra, which is a leprous curse, and it is not related to some common diseases today, like Hansen's disease, which is a germ which is called the Mycobacterium lepra. It was not a physical symptom. It was a physical symptom of a spiritual defect. That means to say that it is coming from a spiritual place as well. So even though there is leprosy, technically speaking today, that is not what is referred to then. This is caused by a spiritual trigger. The Ramban at the end of the parasha in Pasuk Mem Zayin actually points out that this was a blessing that was given to Israel, and it was only in effect when they were in the land of Israel, when they were close to Hashem. This isn't a punishment. It is a blessing to be on a spiritual level in which a person lives on a plane where their actions can trigger certain responses. That means, say, if they act in a certain way or don't act in a certain way, there is an immediate, clear, incandescent response about how they are doing and what they should be doing with that. That is a very profound point. Says the Ramban, it's a blessing which we no longer have, and it was only in the time when we lived in Israel under the auspices, direct auspices of Hashem in such a state of existence. Now, speaking of which, so what actually triggers it? What are the spiritual triggers for this as well? So very famously, we all have heard the concept that tsaras comes is an outcome of speaking Lashon Hara, and we'll see that certainly is a significant aspect of it. However, the Gemara in Erechin on Daf Tesayin and Adavta actually tells us there are 7 spiritual causes that can bring about a person getting tsaras. And let's go through each of them. The first one is Lashon Hara. This is based on a pasuk in Tehillim, which says, Mil Shani Baseser Re'eyu Oisa Amtsis, that when described that a person who defames his neighbor in secret, I will destroy him. That's what Hashem says, meaning causing him to suffer, and that's referred to as tsaras. The next one is Shvichus Damim, if there's, God forbid, murder. This refers to the story in Shmuel Beis, Perek Gimel, where David HaMelech curses the house of Yoav, who was his general, for murdering Avner, and he tells him that you will always have lepers in your family, and that's as a function of Yoav's perhaps readiness to kill people, even when trying to protect David. He was too fast to kill. The third one is Shavuas Shav, a false oath, and this actually goes to the story in Melachim Beis Perek Hey, in which Gehazi, who is the attendant of Elisha, goes behind Elisha's back and tries to get a payment for the favor that Elisha the prophet does for Naaman, who is a general in the armies of Aram. And because he does not tell the truth and he swears falsely on this, he then inherits the leprosy that Naaman was healed from, and it comes to Gehazi himself. The fourth one is Gilui Arayos, immorality, and this is described because we know in Bereshis Yud Beis, this is where in Lech Lecha, where Paro is punished with Negaim, with plagues, because of taking Sarah, abducting Sarah. That's another example of Negaim was understood to be Tzaras. The next one is Gasus Ruach, which is, this is the fifth one, is haughtiness. This refers to King Uzziah or Azariah, who was who decided that he wanted to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, even though he was not a priestly descent, and he immediately received tzaras. Tzaras zarcha b'mitzcha, we're told in Divrei Yamim Beis, Perek Chavav. And then the sixth one is gezel, theft. And this refers to the way, this refers to, as we'll see in Parshas Metzora, in the next Perek and Parsha, when the Kohen addresses a house which has tzaras, the house is emptied out. All the, so to speak, that's symbolic of all the things that perhaps were hiding that belonged to other people. And finally, tsarus ayin, which is the seventh, which is a person who is stingy. Again, that's ba kolash asher labayis, that a person has to take out everything in their house which they wanted to be exclusively theirs is now being publicly shown as well. The Maharsha actually in his commentary on this Gemara does make an interesting point that there are 7 different forms of tzaras that we're going to be seeing, and they perhaps each of them relates to the seven different causes, these spiritual faults in a human being as well. Finally, one last question in our area is, can a Kohen overlook a nega? Can a Kohen overlook a plague? And the answer is yes. Rashi actually quotes over here in Pasuk Yud Daled that there are 2 times where a Kohen will not look at the plague, in other words, not pronounce the person impure, and that is a chasan, a groom during the 7 days of Isha Brachas, or on the Yom Tov as well. There'll be times where for any person on Yom Tov. So in a certain sense, it's almost like there's a little bit of leeway here, where in order to avoid a person at a very special time in their life being made to be impure at that point in time, which begs the question then is, so what is this? How does this work exactly? The person's pure or impure? What does it have to do with seeing? And that's perhaps precisely how this whole business operates, is that the Kohen has to examine the whole person. When examining the person, he's not simply trying to cure an ailment, trying to give a pill to avoid a particular symptom which is troubling a person. He's looking at the entire person. And there's times where you have to look at the entire person and understand that objectively in that context, as the Meshech Chochmah points out, V'ra'o Kohen needs to look at the entire person. If the person's in a context in which this is a personal or a communal simcha, that person perhaps does not need to be proclaimed impure at this point in time. And Rabbi Mordechai Wedek has a beautiful article where he describes that perhaps that is precisely the lesson about marriage itself, is that when a person gets married, they're used to their own habits, they're used to their way of living in their bachelorhood and spinsterhood, and they're living, they have their own space and their own habits and their own way of doing things. Now they live in very close quarters to somebody who does things a little differently, perhaps squeezes the toothpaste out in a different way, and perhaps is clean or timely in a very different way, and orderly in a different way than they were, or not orderly or not timely. And those kind of things become difficult, and a person can fixate upon those and become very upset. But if a person looks at the whole person, realizes that they married this person, they're in this relationship because they wanted to be this person as a whole, then these small details melt away in the larger picture. That's really what's happened over here, and that's the lesson of the proclamation of a chassan in the 7 days of his Sheva Bracha. Similarly, in the same way, that's why, usually speaking, we know that there is a concern for tumas haaretz. When a person is a not knowledgeable Jew, there are certain concerns about tumah and tara. Do they keep all the laws of purity and impurity, trumas and maasros? But when it comes to on the festival, we consider even the Amaratzim, those who are not knowledgeable, as Chaverim, as knowledgeable people, because it's a time when we see the whole of Klal Yisrael, when we see everybody together, and we don't examine in a guide, we don't examine at those times, the times of Simcha, we don't examine all the precise details and exclude and disqualify people as well. And that's perhaps one of the lessons to be learned. It's very famously the word nega itself, a plague. If the letters are arranged in a different order, it is oneg, which is enjoyment, pleasure, something which is special. And that really depends where you put the ayin in the letter. The ayin is the letter, but also means the eye, how you see it. And that's perhaps the lesson that Rashi is teaching us in the exclusions from the proclamation of the Negat Soras. With this, we conclude the second aliyah. In the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful day.